So it looks like we're getting a new Marvel Legends Spider-Man retro line Scorpion based on the animated series, but is this one you want for your collection? Is he worth the money, and is he actually based on Spider-Man the animated series? Be sure you stick around until the end, soulmates, because we're going to talk about what Spider-Man characters we want to see next in the retro line. If you support what I do, please click subscribe and hit the bell for notifications so you don't miss a single video of mine when it comes out. The Scorpion had a somewhat prominent role on Spider-Man the animated series. He was featured on a number of different episodes, and so it made sense that the Scorpion got his first action figure in the Spider-Man the animated series toy line. This was kind of a fun toy. He did not have a bendy tail at the time. Instead, his action feature was when you moved his arm, the tail would move forward and hit Spider-Man with the tip of his tail. Believe it or not, the likeness on this one was actually pretty accurate to the animated series. The problem with the toy is that the tail is so heavy that the action figure tended to fall over unless he was kind of just leaning back on it. Of course, after this, the Scorpion had a few other action figures over the years, but sticking with more Marvel Legends type action figures, he made an appearance in the Spider-Man Classics line in both his comic book style appearance as well as a more animated series inspired appearance. Now, the animated series appearance wasn't quite as accurate as his comic book appearance, but that said, the body type that Toy Biz was using for Scorpion was pretty detailed, and another feature of this one, because it was in Spider-Man Classics, is he had an action feature. He had a little rocket that he would fire out of the tip of his tail, and then it hit Spider-Man, and well, you know the rest. Later on in Hasbro's Marvel Legends line, they released the Scorpion for the Molten Man wave, and this one has largely the same articulation points as the Spider-Man Classic Scorpion. And the detail on this one, funny enough, doesn't look like it's as intricate as it was on the Spider-Man Classics toy, but it's still a pretty decent action figure, and it has the bendy wire in the tail, just like the Spider-Man Classics versions do. Now, we mentioned earlier that in the Spider-Man Classics line, the animated Scorpion reused the comic book Scorpion's body, or I guess I should say vice versa, because the comic book Scorpion came after the animated style Scorpion. But regardless, they reused the same body, and so it's going with Hasbro's new 90s animated series style Scorpion for the Spider-Man retro line. Perhaps you're wondering if there's anything new we're seeing on the sculpt for this animated series Scorpion, and the answer is no. It's the exact same sculpt that we saw on the Molten Man Scorpion. The only difference between that one and this one is that this one is using more animated series style colors, as well as a few paint apps to try and make it look like the animated series somewhat. At first glance, one thing that I really like about this one is that it is standard price, and I say that because we've been seeing a lot of Spider-Man toys recently that have been very expensive and very overpriced. Also worth noting is that this is a fan channel exclusive. It just means you can't get this one at Target or Walmart or whatever brick and mortar store. You have to get this through specialty stores like Amazon or Big Bad Toy Store or Entertainment Earth or even Hasbro Pulse, any of those. So because this is reusing the Molten Man Scorpion body entirely, everything that I said about the Scorpion body before still holds true. This is a fairly nice Scorpion sculpt that we see here. But is it really good for the animated Scorpion? Well, you have to take a lot of liberties with animated Scorpion to make this body mold into that particular version of the character. Looking at his head sculpt, the first difference I see here is that there's 3 lines going down the top of Scorpion's head, but on the cartoon, he only has 1 line, and the little dark green decals that we see on either side of his head on the cartoon are a little closer than what we see here. Also on this action figures, those dark green decals extend a little too far forward on the Scorpion's head. On the cartoon, they're quite a bit further back. Moving down the mask a little bit more, we see that almost black detail around his eyes, And this is actually a pretty big difference compared to the cartoon, because on the cartoon, the lines are much thicker, they aren't quite so thin, and also at the very top of the mask, there are not 2 points at the top of the mask on the cartoon, there's just 1 point. On the toy, there's a lot more space above his eyes where his mask is, but on the show, there's virtually no space between the mask and his eyes, so this mask should be thicker and it should be covering the top part of his eye sockets. And when we get down to the bottom of the mask, there's this little point on the toy that kind of sticks out toward his mouth, but that isn't present on the animated series either. It just sort of ends on a softer point and it connects with the rest of his mask on the show. The last detail that's wrong on Scorpion's mask is the little piece that goes onto his chin. It should be extending all the way to the bottom of his lip, because it does that on the animated series. It's actually larger than what we see here. Moving a little further down the body, we come to the neck where there's a paint deco that's been added to make it look a little bit more like the animated series, but it kind of looks awkward to me, and I was trying to figure out why I thought it looked awkward. And then I realized that this paint deco kind of just squares off, and that's why it doesn't look right. Because the front of Scorpion's neck that's underneath his jaw should be that lime green color in order to be correct with the animated series, and I think this would have looked a lot better if they had continued that lime green all the way up to his jaw. Going down even further on this action figure to his back, we have to look at the base of his tail where it's attached to his back, because that's actually not correct on this action figure either. When we look at Spider-Man the animated series, we see that the base of the Scorpion's tail is actually kind of box-like attached to his back. It does have a little bit of separation in the middle, but when we look at this toy, we see far too many segments on it. It should just be one in the middle, and it should be kind of like he's just got a backpack on him almost. On the gloves, trunks, and boots of Scorpion, at the top of each, there's a little detail that looks like a stinger that comes off on either side of him. It's nice that they did that, but it doesn't work super great. It kind of looks awkward and it's very obviously added on. And I think the reason it looks that way is because when you see it on the animated series, it's kind of rounded off at the base. And on the action figure, those added details look very sharp at the base. If the deco had been softened up a bit, I think maybe it would have worked, but then again, maybe it wouldn't have too. Now, moving back to his tail, at the stinger, it doesn't have that bulb like we see on the action figure. The shape of it is more like an urn, and it also doesn't have that blade that's kind of just pointing out there either. It has more of a hook-shaped blade on it. And for some reason, they thought that adding a dark green bit to the tip of his tail would somehow mask the inaccuracy, but honestly, it would have been better if they had just painted that whole tip dark green. The way that they did it here actually looks less accurate. It's just a bizarre decision. Fortunately for a lot of people, I think that the saving grace of this action figure is going to be that the body they're using and all of its details are actually pretty good. And for the people who didn't already get a Scorpion from the Molten Man wave, this might be pretty appealing to them. The colors do make this one pop a bit, even if he's really not like the show. And as far as the articulation on his torso, I think that it makes good sense why it would be the way it is, because I don't know if an ab crunch would really work on the Scorpion. I would like to see it, but I'm not a big stickler on it because I know how things go with trying to get the Scorpion's backpack on him, and the logistics of designing that can be a little troublesome, we'll say. Is this one worth your money? Well, it depends how you feel about an action figure that isn't all that accurate to the animated series. If you're looking for something that is accurate to the animated series, then you're probably not going to enjoy this all that much. But if you just want a Scorpion action figure, you might be happier with it than the people who are looking for that nostalgia kick. Me, I'm just looking at this action figure and wondering, why did they bother? If they wanted to do an animated Scorpion, they should have just done him up right instead of putting out something that is very obviously taking every shortcut they possibly could. It feels tacky and it feels cheap to me. And I really wish I didn't feel that way, because after the past couple of Spider-Man villain releases, looking at Rhino and the Lizard, those were fairly decent releases. Now that we've seen this Scorpion action figure, what character do we want to see next in the Spider-Man retro line? I would love to see Dr. Octopus, like I've been saying, guys. I hope they do him with bendy tentacles, or if not that, I hope they do articulated tentacles, and I hope they find a way to make it work. But aside from Doc Ock, I would not be mad to see Kraven the Hunter either. I think that he's a worthy addition, and I would love to see him too. Well, Soulmates, what do you think of this Scorpion action figure? Is this one that you have to have for your collection? Are you on the fence about him because maybe you noticed some inaccuracies and you don't know whether you really want him, but maybe you don't have a Scorpion yet? Or are you completely turned off by this one and you're just gonna wait for something else? Let me know what you think down in the comments, guys. I would love to hear from you, and be sure you tell me what Spider-Man character you want to see in the retro line next. If you want to learn more about the new Marvel Legends Spider-Man the Animated Series Spider-Man action figure, be sure you check out this video here, Soulmates.